First of all, we will set a reading time of the research report for 5 minutes, and after this we will go into the debate. We will need a few more minutes due to internet issues. But you could actually read the research report on the app if you downloaded it. There is a MUNelly app, yes. Really? There we go. There it is. time has elapsed. We will now commence, all of these, we will now commence debate regarding the topic of the issue between the conflict between the USA and Iran regarding the nuclear agreement. We will start with 20 minutes of lobbying time in committee now. So you can write some amendments to start the debate. start with the normal amendment. Is there any delegation wishing to have an opening speech? Iran, you recognize?
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we as the delegation of Iran are deeply concerned about the current situation. The United States is acting disgustingly, and we believe this cannot be tolerated in any ways. Let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back to let's go back into the history books. And in 1953, our great leader Mossadegh was overthrown by the United Kingdom and by the United States of America. And first time you had an Operation Ajax, and that one failed. And then even there, after that, you've overthrew our great leader Mossadegh. But we think nobody has any right to rule our country. We as Iran are an independent country, and we decide what happens in our country. And this whole conflict is actually caused by the United States in 1953 because of this move. And you only care about Iran and the Middle East because we have oil. If we wouldn't have oil, you would never be in our country. You would never even care about us. And USA would state money over people, which we think is disgusting. And in 1957, you helped Iran developing a nuclear program. And in 1967, the United States of America provided uranium weapons to Iran. And with the current president, Trump, he claims that the JCPOA is the world's worst deal ever negotiated. But we never heard any reasons why he thought this was disgusting. And this was in 2007. And in July 2007, the United States decided to impose sanctions on Iran, Russia, and North Korea. And in May 2018, we were extremely shocked because of the following move, because the United States of America stepped out of the nuclear agreement. And since May 2018, tensions have risen because of this. And we are not to blame for this. United States is, because they stepped out of this nuclear agreement. And even before this agreement, the United States wanted to reimpose economic sanctions on Iran. And so the United States of America is deliberately trying to destroy our economy. Iran would begin now, because at the moment we stepped out of this, stepped out of the nuclear agreement, so we can have we can have industrial enrichment without limitations. And before also, you called our paramilitary force a terrorist organization. This is the first time ever that the US government calls a certain organization a terrorist organization. We are not a terrorist organization. To be honest, we think Trump is the terrorist here because he decided to kill our great general Soleimani. And Trump is we are not to blame. So please try to support Iran, because we are not the ones to blame. The United States is, because of all this tension. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all.
Any points of information from the House? Iraq, followed by France.
Does the delegation of Iran think that the Iraqi government is open to renegotiate the nuclear deal?
Yes, we are. We are willing to renegotiate the nuclear deal, but we have some conditions.
The delegation of Iran mentioned that no country should have an influence on the government, on the country, but on the other hand, Iran is influencing a lot of other countries, such as Iraq. How does the delegation think about this?
Could the delegate please rephrase their question?
Okay, the delegation of Iran has a mentioned that they don't want any influence on their own country, but on the other hand, they are influencing a lot of other countries. So how are you justifying this?
We do not think overthrowing other governments is the right way to do so.
Thank you.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as none, we suggest to yield the floor back to
We would like to yield the floor to the United States of America if they accept it.
That's granted.
Honorable Chair, esteemed fellow delegates, the USA aims to see the human rights respected in every country. Therefore, we worry about the Middle East the most, as Iran still moves on with their nuclear weapon program which threatens their neighboring countries. Considering the unstable situation in the Middle East, having a new nuclear power only creates harm. Furthermore, Iran tries to menace the USA as we set on sanctions on them for continuing in their nuclear program. As everybody noticed, there is a huge tension between Iran and Israel, which could end in a war, as Iran might threaten Israel with their new power. Iran is not respecting the nuclear agreement because they moved on with producing nuclear weapons. Therefore, we as the UN should act immediately. Each country should be animated to put on pressure on Iran to protect many innocent lives in the Middle East. Thank you for your attention, and we expect our points to be represented in the upcoming resolutions. The delegation yields the floor back to the chair. I am. We are.
Iran, you have been recognized.
We would like to remind the delegation of the United States. In 2016, Iran had its taxes lifted with import and exporting because they were at a positive nuclear behavior. They were not doing anything. We had uranium levels below 3.7%, so we could not build any nuclear bomb. Is the delegation aware of this?
We are. Yes.
Because for follow-up.
Granted.
So why is the delegation claiming this then?
It's a good question. Fuck. Scheiße, ich hab vergessen, Donald Trump, was macht das. Yeah, there's no answer to give on.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the
The
chairs.
floor is yielded.
Are there any more delegations wishing to have an opening speech? Otherwise, we will start with the First Amendment, which we get hopefully really soon to our spot here. Are there any delegations working currently on an amendment? USA too. Thank you. Rise up and state your point.
Das ist nicht mal ein Amendment.
Ja.
Wen rufen wir nach vorne? Die USA?
Ja, genau.
United States, may you please.
To the chairs, please.
This is not the right way to impose an amendment. The point of close fails. There is no
You need another word for decrease.
Okay.
Or you have to reformulate the
forces
sentence.
or urges. Yeah, sure. Ach, das Gruppenfoto machen wir um 13:30, ne?
Ja, habe ich gelesen.
Ja gut, dann sage ich das mal kurz.
As a little information by the chairs, the group photo with all delegates from all committees will be done after the meal at the lunch. It will be about 1:30 p.m.
So make sure all of you are there. Komm. Mach mal fertig. Sind das die einzigen, die im Inventar haben? Und die auch. Und ich glaube, hier wird auch an einem gearbeitet. Okay. We are still waiting for amendments. Iran? Ah, stimmt. Ich füge jetzt einfach im Iran hinzu, ne? Was? Hier steht nichts, wo das darauf reduziert werden soll, aber ich denke bei Iran. Ne? In die Iran. Oder sollen wir nochmal nachfragen? Ja. USA, United States, could you please approach the chairs? The amount of uranium in the Iran or everywhere? Global. Oh, okay. 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 Wie hast du das gemacht? Das Fett oder kursiv? Ich habe die 1 plus das erste Fett gemacht und dann darüber noch geschrieben, wer es submitted hat.
Uranium in Iran.
Okay,
This would
as
be-
you already thought. Okay. In by the United States of America, please come to the front and read out your amendment.
Yeah, suggest to decrease the amount of uranium in the Iran to 2%. And we do think that if
Honorable chairs, the delegates.
I'm sorry, honorable chair, esteemed fellow delegates, as you see, we do think that if Iran has too much uranium, the danger of harming other countries is too high. So we look forward for them to decrease the amount of uranium they do have. The floor is yielded, and we are not open for any point of information.
Thank you, delegate. Then we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs. As a co-submitter, we would like to have the position from Somalia. Please come to the front and state your point. You're as a co-submitter here. Yeah.
then another co-submitter, for example, Saudi Arabia, has to state.
Honorable Chairs, dear delegates, we as the delegation of Saudi Arabia are strongly in favor of this amendment handled in by the US. We are aware of the fact that a country like the Iran needs nuclear power to develop its own interests. But we have to be sure that the trust we are given to the Iran isn't hurt. The delegation of Saudi Arabia thinks that through handling in the amendment from the US, the delegation of the United States are making a huge step to a solution of this conflict. I'm not open to any points of information.
Thank you, Delegate. Then we suggest you yield the floor back
So
to
I
the
yield
chairs.
it.
We are now in time in favor of this amendment. Then we're moving into time against. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? Iran, followed by India, followed by China.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we are disgusted by this amendment. 2% is just a random number. It doesn't make any sense. It's not based on any mathematical calculations. What mathematical calculations we have are way better. Their uranium levels in Iran have been decreased to 3.67%. This number because this is 300 kilograms of uranium. This means we cannot build a nuclear bomb, but we can still use uranium for our energy levels, which is very important in the Middle East. Nuclear energy is a clean form of energy. Well, wait. Nuclear energy is a clean form of energy, and it's very useful for our country. Therefore, this number is 3.67%. We do not like that the United States of America is trying to limit our nuclear energy levels and therefore encourages us to use other forms of energy, which are, for example, fossil fuels. And we do not agree with this at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open for any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any such in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield it.
India,
GCPOA,
as next.
was ist das? Rejoin gibt es also gar nicht. Rejoin nicht.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we as the delegation of India do not see this as an effective amendment. That is because it suggests to decrease the amount of uranium in the Iran to 2%. However, the United States of America doesn't suggest anything it will do in return. Therefore, we merely see this as something that would stir up tensions between Iran and the United States of America even more rather than decreasing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any such in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield.
Next speaker, China.
Delegates, we do not understand why the United States of America handled this in this amendment. First of all, there's already a limit on the amount of uranium Iran can produce and use within their country. So we do not understand why we would limit a predetermined amount even further, although we have reached an agreement in 2015 about this. Furthermore, we also do think it is quite hypocritical for the United States of America to hand this in this amendment, considering they are the ones that have built the nuclear reactions within Iran during the era of the Shah. And now they suddenly say, no, we don't want the uranium there, although it's the fault of the United States of America for putting the uranium there. It seems quite hypocritical and truly idiotic to us. Thank you. We are not open to any points of information.
Thank you, Delegate. Then we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? UK, you have to recognize.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates. Although the USA is usually our ally, we believe that this amendment is not based on any facts. We think it is simply drawn up with a random number. And as we do want Iran to become less of a superpower because we do not like them as well, we think that this should happen in another way. And by suggesting this amendment, we think that the USA is only thinking in its best interest. And as we are at the United Nations, we should think in everyone's best interest, and therefore we do not support it, and we strongly suggest that everyone votes against.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any point of information?
Any and all.
Are there any points of information in the House? Iran has been recognized.
Is the delegation of the United Kingdom aware that the United Kingdom did not support USA to leave the nuclear agreement, so therefore should be also therefore the ally they claim to have is not that strong anymore as they used to have?
Yes, our relationship have worsened over the years. However, we do still see them as an ally.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you use the floor.
So yield.
We are still in time against. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak against this amendment?
Motion to move into voting procedure.
Rise and state your point.
What is the 2% standing for? 2%. Enriched. So that's the amount of enrichment. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So now we will vote on this amendment. Note passing is suspended. Admins, please keep voting position. All delegations wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards high now. You may lower placards. All delegations wishing to speak against this, wishing to vote against this amendment, please raise your placards high now. Granted. It's granted. Somalia, you have to raise up and explain your vote.
The delegation of Somalia didn't like Iran, so I vote for.
No usage of personal pronouns, please. This amendment has not passed. Clapping is not in order, although veto is not useful here because it is not necessary.
You don't have to. It fails anyway.
We will now entertain the amendment handed in by Iran. Iran, please come to the front and read out your amendment.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we are willing to renegotiate the nuclear agreement. We would like to step in the nuclear agreement, but we have 4 conditions, and this is the first one. We demand the USA to rejoin the GCPOA, and we strongly encourage them to do so. They stepped out for no reason, so why not step in for no reason again as well?
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all.
UK, followed by Iraq, followed by India.
You recall that the delegate of Iran said that there were 4 components to his plan. However, will the plan still be standing if the House will only agree on 1 of the 4, 2 of the 4? We were wondering about that.
That's a good question. Depending on which clause will pass, we'll think of that.
A request for follow-up?
Granted.
Then why is the delegate not proposing them all in one amendment with sub-clauses? Because now the chances will be great that only 1, 2, or 3 will pass and the whole plan won't pass, which will not reach the goal of the delegate?
Because if we hand in one amendment and the USA or veto country decides to disagree, then the whole amendment will be vetoed, and then we have 0 clauses. So we want to do it step by step.
Okay.
Could the delegation be more clear about the extra demands that the Iranian government seeks to be put in place to the United States of America? Because it only says that it demands to rejoin it, but then there's not really a change in the status quo.
please rephrase
So
the question.
the delegate is suggesting to go back to the situation before the USA left, but the delegation has said before that they wanted extra concessions from the United States, and we want clarification on that.
Could the delegate of Iran please explain a bit more why the United States should rejoin the GCPOA and what effects this would have, as they said, joining back in for no reason? Is there anything more they can explain?
Yeah, we used the wrong words there. If they rejoin the GCPOA, tensions will drop again because we think that the tensions have risen because they left it. So by rejoining it, tensions between Iran and the United States will drop again, and we think that's best for all countries.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you give the floor back to the chair.
So we will.
We are now in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? Please raise your hand. Germany, you have been recognized.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we came together here today to solve the Iranian-American problem, and we believe that this amendment brings us closer to world peace, and therefore we believe that this is a good amendment. Furthermore, we would like to remind the House of the wars of last century, and wars aren't good for world economy, and therefore we think that we should cooperate and find a solution for this problem, and therefore we hope that this amendment passes, as we think that this amendment will help us to come closer to world peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I open to any points of information.
Any and all.
Are there any points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you give the floor back to the chairs. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? Japan, you have been recognized.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, this is a negotiated and really, the GCPOA is a negotiated and really good plan, and it will cause stability and peace to the Iranian nuclear issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you give the floor back to the chairs. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? Do I hear a motion to come into time against?
Motion to move into time against.
Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment?
Motion to move into voting procedure.
Second.
We'll now be moving into voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admins, please keep voting position. All delegates wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards.
Yeah, and let's explain the vote over. What are you going to speak against?
May I lower your placards? All delegations wishing to vote against this amendment, please raise your placards.
Motion to explain the vote of the USA.
We are not ready.
Oh.
You don't have. Are there any delegations wishing to abstain of this amendment?
It's not
in the
allowed.
No
voting
abstaining.
procedure?
No abstaining during the amendment.
You're not using your veto?
Motion to explain the veto use of the USA,
Exactly.
as he did not speak against.
Granted.
The USA thinks that this amendment shouldn't pass. So first of all, we think that we thought that the Iran produced more than said in the GCPOA. So this was the reason why the USA left this agreement, and therefore rejoining this agreement is so for the
Right of reply, since we have been directly mentioned.
Granted.
Again, as we mentioned, we were checked and therefore our taxes were lifted. So we didn't produce more because otherwise we would have had import taxes and export taxes. So we believe this is not a valid argument for this.
The USA believes that there should be another solution than rejoining the GCPOA. It would be better if the USA and Iran could handle another agreement than this one.
Go back to zero then.
We now need more amendments. Are there any delegations currently working on an amendment?
Als deze niet doorgaat, dan ga ik er sowieso niet.
Then we have to wait.
Ik ga dan blijven.
Was this the most moderate?
Yeah, I think so. Exactly. Exactly. And this is, I think, the best, most, if it's, here, lees.
Who wants some Haribos? If I can. Yes. Way.
I'm searching for some papers later on. But if you want to hand in amendments, here, use messages.
Ist eh nicht für mich.
Weil ich muss ja gucken, je nachdem wie viel Inhalt da ist, kannst du dann nicht weil jetzt das ist eine Resolution vom Legal, die je nachdem hier vorgestellt werden muss, plus entertained werden muss. Kannst du die schon mal durchlesen,
Okay.
dann können wir gucken, ob wir das einbringen können.
Ich guck durch. Alles klar. Wenn nichts draufsteht, kommt von Iran. Die ist falsch. Steht die noch jetzt drauf? He's developing.
Hat sie keine Amendment Sheets?
Doch, aber die nutzt nämlich keiner. Die sind alle zu faul, die zu nutzen.
The House, please come to order.
Das dann, ne? Iraq. Weiter kannst du machen. Ja.
We will now entertain the amendment handed in by Iraq. Iraq, please come to the front and read out your amendment. And as always, eating is not allowed now.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we...
Order.
Hosting right. Okay, honorable chairs, dear delegates, we believe that peace is the most important thing in the Middle East. The recent tensions between Iran and the USA have caused many things that we want to prevent in the future. We think that the Iran nuclear agreement contained things that both sides didn't agree with. Therefore, we believe that we should offer Iran and the USA a new option to start over again. And we are offering our own country to act as a mediator because we're neutral in this conflict. We both host US troops and we also have friendly relations with the country of Iran. We also believe that these tensions have caused many things that we want to prevent, like the killing of Qasem Soleimani on our territory. So we believe that if these tensions continue, other events will happen in the future, which we don't want to happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any points of information in the House? UK, followed by Iran, followed by Russian Federation.
The delegate of the USA had just not agreed on a previous amendment about a nuclear deal, which is a different one than a new one, of course. Why does the delegate of Iraq think that now they will try to negotiate?
Because we've talked, we've actually negotiated with the delegation of the USA, and they said they would agree to renegotiate the deal.
What does the delegation mean with renegotiating? What would be different from the original nuclear agreement?
We just want to offer a framework in which a new deal can be constructed, but we don't necessarily feel we have not had the time yet to really talk to the delegation of America and talk to the delegation of Iran to really set out a motion or a plan to really define a new deal. But we think that just providing the framework is enough, and if the delegation and we can just build on this with second amendments and just to make the new deal constructive.
Follow-up?
Granted.
What will happen with the old nuclear agreement? What is
Since both countries thought it was unfair and clearly it is not working because both sides don't agree with it anymore, we think it's necessary to renegotiate it.
Okay.
The deal that was left in the old place will just disappear. It will just be replaced with a new one.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you give the floor back to the chairs. We are now in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? UK.
Honourable chairs, dear delegates, we as the delegation of the UK believe that the delegation of Iraq is trying to make an actual change now. He's wanting to bring two countries together to renegotiate the deal, and we think that he's perfectly suited to be the mediator as a delegation of Iraq, because as he already mentioned, the tensions are coming from both sides, therefore he's completely neutral. We think that all countries should agree upon this amendment, as it is a good step towards a whole resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any delegations with points of information? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor
So
back to the
yield.
chairs. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? We are now moving into time against. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? This will be granted.
Was? Das ist doch kein Amendment. Das ist eine Aufzählung von Ländern. Could the delegate please come to the chairs first?
Could
And
you
explain.
please explain your amendment?
How shall we
As it does
integrate
not
it?
state any clauses.
The signatories, these countries also signed the GCPOA.
Okay, so they're all out of
the
it.
United States and Iran, but then all countries do.
Okay, so just as an addition, all of these countries.
Addition, yeah, sorry, I
As-
want to make it fast.
Mediators.
As
I think as
the
renegotiators.
United States and then other countries plus Iran to renegotiate with all, because the original GCPOA was negotiated with all these countries.
Okay.
So we want to we would think it would be fair if we negotiate closely with these countries.
Give us a little moment.
Yes.
Soll ich aufzählen? Ja. China, EU, lol, was? EU? Russia, UK, Germany.
Und Japan auch, ne?
Nee, Japan steht.
Aber Japan war auch original dabei.
Which one is this? EU? The whole EU?
The EU has signed it.
What about Japan? Okay, so all member states of the EU. I think Japan also signed it. No.
That's what it says here. I don't know.
Okay. And all other member states of the EU.
Or you can say P5 members plus Germany and EU. Maybe that's easier.
Yeah, no, and just add and all members of the EU. Okay. Perfect. Da ist noch ein Komma gleich.
Yes.
Jetzt perfekt.
Dann nehme ich aber die beiden auch weg, oder? Oder?
ist egal,
Nee,
ist
okay.
okay.
So, ne, ist richtig, ja. Scheiße, das wollte ich nicht.
Da unten ein bisschen was. Ich weiß jetzt gefunden. No, it's not.
Honorable Chair, the delegates, we think the intention of this amendment is good, but we would like to enlarge the amendment as well. The original GCPOA was signed by Iran, the EU, China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, and Germany, and the United States of America. So we think it would be fair if the renegotiations would be done with the same countries as well. And if other countries present would also like to join this agreement, they would have to make another amendment. And because we think it would be we don't think it would be wise if only the United States and Iran would be negotiating, because there were also a lot of other countries present, and I think it would be we can move on and not be left with a previous
Egypt
made
and China.
previous made agreement, because this agreement is we will have this agreement until 2025. And if we now make a new agreement, then we have a mix of agreements, and we think that would be unclear. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any points of information in the House? Iraq, you have been recognized.
We are willing to accept this as a friendly amendment.
It changes quite thing, right? It's quite
Yeah. Like the nature of the clause isn't changed. Yeah.
So can we debate, or is it?
Yeah.
Accept it.
It's already passed.
Accept it.
Okay. But not the whole amendment instead.
No.
So you vote to the chair.
Thank you, delegate. Perfect. Now we are in time in favor of the amendment as a whole. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? Syria, come to the front, please. Friendly amendment.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we believe a new deal is crucial for peace and balance in the Middle East. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open for 2 points of information?
Yes, too.
Are there 2 points of information in the House?
Ich schicke das weiter.
Germany.
What?
Ist das angefangen? Ja. Nein, aber die wollen Irak und Iran, die wollen
Oh, we're getting some water.
Yes. Ah,
Yes.
Gerne hier hinstellen.
We yield the floor back to the chairs.
Thank you, delegate. Yeah. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment as a whole? Jungs, Dominik, Moment mal.
Ich hol's wieder.
Do I hear a motion to come into time against? We're now in time against. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? We're now moving into voting procedure. That's the word what I searched. Note passing is suspended. Admins, please keep voting position. All delegations wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards high now. Okay.
Was ist das?
Ja.
Das heißt nur der kompletten Hand. Was ist kompletten Hand? Was ist komplett?
Okay, with 100%, this amendment has passed. Clapping is definitely in order.
Sehr schön.
We have some amendments still here.
Ja. So, das hier war Müll, das müssen wir nochmal neu machen, weil das war eingelassen. Also müssen wir noch nachfragen.
Iran, could you please approach to the chairs?
Das haben wir gestern die ganze Zeit gefragt. Heißt das approach the chairs oder approach to the chairs? Keine Ahnung.
Is this amendment from your country still needed, or this from you, Iran?
Do you want to still impose it? Yeah.
But like that's another one. Not that's not the same. That's another amendment. Do you want to still entertain it here?
Yeah, this is a new amendment, right?
Yeah, okay,
sure.
but
maybe, but we don't
We have a
understand
question.
the nature of this amendment. It's kind of confusing.
Okay.
Could you please explain it to us?
Okay, with import taxes, a lot of countries have taxes because I import and export for Iran.
Yeah.
We don't want it anymore, but we cannot just say we just want this. So we want to do something in return to favor them as well.
Yeah, but it states to relift the import and export taxes with Iran.
This will like mean that you're uplifting.
Oh wait.
To relift. It means that the taxes are getting higher.
Okay,
You
I
don't
Like
want
for all
that
of the, for all parties, the taxes are getting higher in this amendment.
Okay,
to
no, that's not right.
rethink.
Want to.
Like we can give you this and you're.
I will change it.
Yes.
And ich glaube, es ist nicht erlaubt, da einen Punkt zu machen, ne?
Yeah,
Iran, you cannot make a full stop in an amendment. It has to be with subclauses and
Oh,
things like this.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, haben wir jetzt gerade keins, ne? Nee.
Warte, ja, aber wollen wir dann jetzt das von drüben machen?
Ja, gute Idee. Hast du das auf dem Stick oder so?
Ja.
Soll ich deins anstecken oder?
Ja, will ich sagen. Ich sehe schon. Order in the house, please. Yeah. Order in the house, please. As the legal committee has already passed a whole resolution which has to be entertained here in the Security Council, we will now show you this resolution. After reading time, the main submitter will come and give a speech about this resolution, and we have time to give points of information.
Von wem kommt das? Teddy. Italy, okay. Kann ich gleich holen.
Yeah, that's right. Just read.
Don't complain, read.
And think about how you will vote on it.
Wollen wir read until?
A reading time set for 4 minutes.
Motion to table the resolution.
This one will be granted because it's a whole resolution from the legal committee. Yeah. Objection, there's no tabling.
Yeah, I know, but we can do more fun topics instead of something that will be vetoed in the end anyway.
Denied. Order,
Yes,
please.
let him come and look what he has to say about it. You would wish the same last year.
I mean, I did.
Yeah, you did the same last year.
To be quite honest, I did do the same last year.
He was also in the Security Council and had to present our resolution there.
Also, ja. Okay. Zum Vetorecht sagen die nichts, ne? Doch, doch, das Vetorecht wird hier geschritten. Jedoch mit der Maßgabe, dass sich bei Beschlüssen aufgrund des Kapitels 4 und des Artikel 2 Absatz 2 die Streitparteien der Stimme enthalten. Und das sind die ersten Streitparteien wahrscheinlich. Das sind ja meistens G5-Länder. Ja. P5-Länder. Die wollen das schon streiten. Okay, fragst du, ob die fertig sind, dann hol ich Italien. Ja, Italien ist es, ne?
Yeah. Okay, reading time has elapsed. Now the delegate of Italy from the legal committee will become and hold his speech here. Delegate of Italy, yes. Yeah.
Diese Resolution, ja. Diskutieren wir jetzt darüber, ob wir die annehmen oder was genau eine Stimme so machen? So. Also es steht rein theoretisch, wenn ich Lust hätte, mein Veto.
Ja, richtig. Also du solltest es nutzen, weil dein Vetorecht wird da dran weggenommen.
Ich weiß, ich will es selber gerade sagen.
Weet je wat? Ik ga zeggen, ik accepteer het zo. Ik ben Jongens, willen jullie vetorechten? Ik ben het ermee eens of niet.
And please be nice to the delegate. Thank you.
Als je bent vetorechten.
Order, please. Order in the house, please. Delegate, you can start.
Honorable chairs, dear fellow delegates, we, the delegation of Italy, would like to present to you the following resolution. We, as the General Assembly, stress the following points. First, that we strongly affirm the creation of the amendment to the UN Charter that would, in case of a humanitarian crisis, suspend Article 27.3. Secondly, that we authorize the creation of a new body within the UN that would be solely devoted in finding disputes described by Article 34, and that this body be granted the power to bring found disputes or threats to peace to the Security Council. 3, that we request the number of non-permanent members on the Security Council be increased to 16, starting at the next election of non-permanent members. And lastly, that we further request an amendment to the United Nations Charter to be created that would allow the General Assembly to reopen debate within their chambers on any resolution which did not pass the Security Council, so long as 4/5 of the General Assembly is in favor of doing so. We stress the following points as it would give us a number of benefits. First of all, the first operative clause allows, in times of great crisis, us to facilitate better debate. We have seen in the past that on certain issues, due to the way that Article 27.3 is written, we have seen large stifles on specific movements and a way that the debate is structured. With this resolution in place, we could look towards holding better and cleaner debate and look towards a better resolution of conflict and crises. Our second point allows for a much wider and also faster way of reporting threats to peace and fall within our mission of, which is described within the preamble clauses of the United Nations Charter. This would mean that without the agency laid to a specific country to bring forward a dispute, we can look towards fast response that will aid us into getting a cleaner resolution on any conflict. The increase of members within Operative Clause 3 simply allows for more voices in the Security Council, which of course means with the more voices more solutions might be brought forward to which will increase the overall quality of resolutions and solutions that we pass as the United Nations. Our last clause, of course, allows for further scrutiny and a system of checks and balances between the General Assembly and the United Nations Security Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all.
Are there any points of information in the House? China, you have been recognized, followed by Syria.
Although we truly respect the naivety and innocence of the delegate of Italy from the legal committee for creating such a resolution with ideals that don't make any sense and are completely irrelevant and impossible, we must really express our gratitude and respect that they still dare to present it in front of the Security Council. However, we still must ask, how did the delegate and the entire legal committee think it was a good idea to present a resolution to a council with members that can veto, and it hurts to those members? Do they not think that we will just veto it anyway? So we truly do not see the point in this entire resolution. So we really want to know what's brought this resolution into being.
The legal committee hopes that the Security Council will see the value of having a cleaner and faster approach and ability to solve humanitarian crises. We severely and fully affirm that with this resolution we can look towards a much quicker and also, in the end, of course, more respecting of human life. With the first operative clause, we can look towards a simple, better resolution of human rights violations and crises, epidemics. We can look towards famines. We can look towards conflict. We must hope, as a peace-loving, democracy-seeking system and union of nations, that we can fall to the conclusions and systems and sentences that were laid down in our preamble. Thank you, Delegate.
Request for follow-up.
Granted.
We really like the words the delegate of Italy uses here. It's quite idealistic and beautiful. However, it's still not really sensical because it's just a pipe dream. How would we ever accept this if it does not benefit us? The delegate of Italy claims the United Nations to be a peace-loving, peace-seeking organization. However, it really isn't. And this is not offensive or anything. We can claim it isn't. We are here to represent our own ideals and benefit from one another. And if we cannot benefit from it, we see no reason to vote in favor. So we still must ask, why do we, as a delegation of China, have any reason to vote in favor of this resolution?
When we first came together in San Francisco to lay down our charter and look towards the ideals that we want to represent as a near world federation, we chose these ideals, and currently the question that was discussed within the legal committee is how do we resolve the question between the self-interests of countries and the mission that is supposed to be the United Nations. If we look only at the current problems with the system and say that because these problems are concurrent, we cannot solve them, we are stuck in an endless loop where we only look towards our own flaw and refuse to acknowledge or better them because they are currently present. We can always improve, and the legal committee and the delegation of Italy fully believes that this would be a step in the right direction.
Request for follow-up?
Last one granted.
The thing is, the delegate, it seems to us as though the delegate is just reading up a pre-written speech because it does not seem they are responding to our actual question. So allow us to perhaps make it a bit clearer. The delegate says that we refuse to acknowledge the problem. However, we have acknowledged the problem, but we say that this isn't a problem because it is impossible. One can simply not expect from the United Nations that we all seek peace and harmony because that would simply not benefit us. And although we still respect the ideals they are trying to strive towards, we still want to know, why do we as China have any reason to vote in favor besides harmony and peace seeking?
We do hope that the delegation of China do have it in their heart to seek peace as the ultimate priority. The attempt to have human lives and to save them must be one of the penultimate goals of this organization, and we hope that as a member state, the delegation of China also adheres to those ideals. Thank you, Delegate.
Syria.
We were wondering, what does Article 27.3 include?
Point of information to the House.
I'm asking him.
Yeah, but
we.
Chill out.
You are allowed. Okay, fine.
Article 27.3 describes voting procedures of the Security Council, included but not limited to the fact that if a permanent member would vote against a resolution, it automatically fails. Furthermore, it includes the concave in that if a permanent member is involved in the dispute, as would any member, they are not allowed to vote.
Still a point of information to the House.
Granted.
It is the plight of a United Nations member to know all articles and do not. It is just absolutely ridiculous, and it hurts us that the Syrian delegates dares to claim that they do not know Article 27.3, one of the most important parts of the UN Charter, and they still dare to ask another delegate, not even from the Security Council, it just baffles us. It's absolutely extraordinary. Thank you.
Please abstain from unusual language. Are there any more points of information in the House? Russian Federation.
For the time being, the Russian Federation doesn't see a reason why the Security Council shouldn't be able to, why this should be a better, like why we should create another organ to basically take over the same role as the Security Council. So we wanted to ask if the delegation of Italy is trying to portray the Security Council as a defect organ.
The delegation of Italy thinks that, alongside the General Assembly Sixth Committee, that if we have more agency and organizations that can run parallel to, with speed and rapid response, analyze and bring forward threats, we can look towards cleaner and faster response, which ultimately, when it comes to disputes or crises, only benefit from more time in discussion and more time to react towards.
Request for follow-up.
Granted.
So, does the delegation of Italy believe that raising the number of non-permanent members would speed up the process of argumentation and acting therefore?
That would remain to be seen, as the ultimate goal of that clause is to just increase the quality of debate and solution.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any more points of information in the House? India, you have been recognized.
Would the delegates of Italy also think banning veto rights in general would be a good solution to the problem we are currently facing? Because the veto rights have been already introduced in 1948, and the countries which were included, for example, France and the UK, its influence are at this point are way smaller than, for example, other countries now, like India. How does the delegate think about this?
We, the delegation, feel that it would be, there are merits to both sides of that discussion. There are pros and cons either way. And furthermore, the legal committee had discussed such a proposition and it ultimately did not pass, and we only present this. It would be up to perhaps the Security Council or another session of the legal committee to look towards seeing whether or not the veto powers as they currently are to remain. Thank you.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as none, please suggest you give the floor back to the chair. Thank you. Are there any co-submitters wishing to speak also for the resolution?
It would seem as there are none.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. You can leave the room.
Yes, that's what the question was.
We're now in time in favor of this whole resolution. Before voting, are there any delegations wishing to speak in favor?
Second.
We're now in time against this.
Second.
We're now coming into voting procedure.
No, Elisa, just leave it.
You cannot influence other states in your behavior. Is the delegation of UK wishing to speak in favor or against this?
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we as a delegation, esteemed guests, we as a delegation of the UK believe that it's already clear what the House is going to vote on this resolution. However, we did want to speak against, as we would otherwise veto it, and we did not want to be the delegation that vetoes something whilst they have not spoken against. So that's why we're standing here right now. We believe this resolution is not entirely bad. However, the main components of it suggest that, first of all, the Security Council will be enlarged. We think this will cause a lot of chaos, and we do not like that. Second of all, we would like to exercise our veto rights in the future, and this is why we're against the resolution. We suggest you all vote against it.
Sure. Thank you, Delegate, for your speech. Are you open for any points of information?
Any and all.
China.
We are wondering why the United Kingdom says they do not want to speak against, why they are claiming that they do not want to use our veto rights if they have not spoken against. However, since we believe that the majority of this council will vote against anyway, the veto won't be used. So we are wondering why the delegate of the United Kingdom brought up the point.
Well, we as a delegate of the United Kingdom brought up the point because we think it's important to discuss a resolution before you vote on it. It's not even an amendment. It's an entire resolution we're voting on, and everyone was too lazy to say something. So yes, the delegate of the United Kingdom will come in front, take on the duty of presenting the opinion of the whole House, and we think it's now a good time to move into voting procedure. Thank you for your excellent cooperation.
Request for a follow-up?
Not
just like it's
denied.
It's a one-word answer.
Denied. Sit down,
We
please.
just want to ask if the delegate is satisfied now.
Yes.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as none, we suggest you
So
go
we
back
yield.
to the chairs. We are now in time against. Do I hear a motion to come into voting procedure? We're now at the voting procedure. Every delegation wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placard high now. You may lower your placards. Every delegation wishing to vote against this amendment, this whole resolution, please raise your placard high now. You may lower. Any delegation wishing to abstain? Sorry, okay, sorry. Okay. With an overwhelming majority, this whole resolution did not pass. Clapping is not in order. And we will now come back to our main topic.
Ich bringe Neuigkeiten rüber. Aber vorher
Das machen wir beide. And before this, we will have a 5-minute break because we have to present the voting. order.
Okay. Sie haben gesagt, Sie haben alles drauf bekommen von der Redezeit. Das ist richtig.
Could the House please come to order? Nassim, could you give me a water bottle?
Entire one for myself. They are placed by the.
Oh, yeah, okay. India, Iraq, Japan, please come to an order. We want to entertain an amendment of second degree.
Okay.
Yeah, we can look for this later on. We will now continue with our topic 2. We have an amendment of the second degree handed in by Saudi Arabia. Please come to the front and explain your amendment. There will be a punishment.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we as a delegation of Saudi Arabia want to have a big variety of countries, especially of them who are affected by the conflict within the negotiations. We have a different relationship to the Iran, and we are directly affected by threatenings of the Iran. So we want to have the ability to be part of further negotiations. We think that more countries who are affected of this conflict have to be mentioned concerning the negotiations. I'm open to any points of information.
Are there any points of the House? Okay, you have been recognized.
As the delegation of Saudi Arabia has close ties with the delegation of the United States, and that delegation is already included, doesn't the delegation believe that their needs will be voiced through the United States?
I don't think so. I think that every country, we think that every country has to have a voice concerning the negotiations.
Request for follow-up.
Granted.
So the delegate is suggesting that all countries in the world should have a say in this negotiation, which would be absolutely catastrophic, as this negotiation is already ongoing for so long and it's so chaotic, and the delegate is simply stating, oh yes, but everyone should voice their needs?
No, we as Saudi Arabia are directly affected by this conflict, and we think that every country who is affected by the conflict has to be inside or has to take part of the negotiations.
Request for follow-up?
If it's short, granted.
So a lot of countries are affected by this because it's literally about nuclear power. So simply any country could say that they are affected. Doesn't the delegate think that he's only voicing his own needs and not thinking about the other countries in the committee?
We think that we are way more affected by this conflict than other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Iran, you have been recognized.
We are wondering why the Saudi Arabia did not sign the JCPOA in the first place, but now suddenly decides, oh yeah, we want to be part of it.
Sorry, can you speak up a little?
We as a delegation of Iran are wondering why Saudi Arabia was not included in the original JCPOA, and suddenly now it wants to be part of the nuclear agreement. Why? What is that?
Yeah, because we want to have a voice inside these negotiations.
Follow up?
Granted.
Why with the previous agreement, why didn't you want a voice?
We are involved in the Yemen conflict, and we are also inside this Yemen conflict supporting troops which are working against you, and these troops which you are supporting are attacking us directly by rockets, for example.
Could the delegate please come to a question? He asked why you
Yeah,
were
why
part
didn't
of the previous
So what?
negotiation.
Exactly.
Warum warst du damals nicht dabei? Das ist ja schon die zweite Fassung, es gab eine erste Fassung schon. Warum warst du bei der ersten nicht schon?
We're actually not going to answer this.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Egypt, followed by Iraq.
Why does the delegate of Saudi Arabia believe that every country should have a say in this, if not even every citizen in Saudi Arabia, especially the females, have any rights?
I think that we don't have to discuss about rights in my country right now. we have to discuss about the rights which are concerning this conflict. I think the point that you mentioned right now can be mentioned in other discussions, but they don't have to be mentioned now.
We have some concerns about the intentions of the delegation of Saudi Arabia because we are very worried. Saudi Arabia and Iran have been staunch enemies in the Middle East for ages since the Islamic Revolution.
Yes.
And we believe that maybe the delegation or just the government of Saudi Arabia could make use of this agreement to potentially weaken the deal or even cause it to get destroyed. So can the delegation of Saudi Arabia address these concerns?
Yeah, we don't want to have a self-usage out of being part of this negotiations. We only want to save our own country. So because we have threats from the Iran, and we want to save our own country and our citizens and our country.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs. 2 points of information by the chairs. First, please abstain from using personal pronouns to Saudi Arabia. And second, speaking faster didn't make the sentence shorter for UK. We are now in time in favor of this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to speak in
Motion
favor?
to table the amendment.
Objection. United States, you want to speak in favor of this amendment?
Yes.
Then please take the floor.
Ja, maar ik vind hem goed zonder het Saoedi-Arabië gedeelte.
This is not the official MUN language. Please abstain from using Netherlands. The Dutch language, Netherlands. Order, please.
So we just shortly want to highlight that
honorable chairs, the delegates.
Honorable chairs, esteemed fellow delegates. So we shortly just want to highlight that if that many countries take part in the negotiations, then we think the country who's directly involved, like Saudi Arabia, should also take part in them. So we don't see the problem. We don't see why many countries have a big problem with Saudi Arabia taking part in these negotiations.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points
Yes.
of information?
One.
Any such in the House? Egypt, you have been recognized.
If the delegate of the United States believes that the only reason why other delegates should agree with this amendment to the second degree is because countries do not have a problem with Saudi Arabia, then why should it be Saudi Arabia in particular if there are a lot of countries that most delegates will not have a problem with?
We need to correct ourselves. We said that Saudi Arabia should be involved as they are directly involved because Iran is one of the states has an issue going on with Saudi Arabia. So we think as this directly harms the country of Saudi Arabia, they should take part in the negotiations.
A request for follow-up? There are several countries that are involved with Iran. For example, our country, Egypt, has better relationships with Iran. So why should Saudi Arabia be involved with these negotiations if there are several countries that are affected by these issues?
The country can feel free to send in another amendment, second degree, if they wish to also take part in the negotiations. But for Saudi Arabia, there's no problem for them to take part. I guess that we guess.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as none, we suggest you give the floor back to the chairs. We are still in time in favor of this amendment to the second degree. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor? Then we are moving to move into time against. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment to the second degree? Syria, followed by Egypt.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, adding Saudi Arabia to the table of the conversations about this agreement will not add any value. It will probably only delay the deal, and it will set up okay, so adding Saudi Arabia, Saudi sorry, Add- sorry, adding Saudi Arabia will not add anything valuable to the negotiations, and it will only further slow down the progress of an already very delicate deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points of information in the House?
Uh,
USA, followed by Russia.
Two.
Is the delegate aware of the fact that, first of all, if Saudi Arabia isn't allowed to enter the negotiations, that we will use our veto rights? So it would be the best if they would allow to enter the conversations. And secondly, there were no agreement, and there was no negotiations after for this amendment. So this would be nevertheless one step into the right way.
Could you rephrase your question, please?
Are you aware of the fact that we, as the USA, would use our veto right if the Saudi Arabia isn't allowed to enter the negotiations?
Well, you already voted in favor of the amendment, so. But now Saudi Arabia wants to join, and we won't allow it. Now you're gonna veto it? Well, that's a question.
Guess someone. It's okay.
It doesn't really make sense.
Forgot it.
Federation. May the
Isn't
House
the
please come to an order?
Isn't the delegation of Syria?
Yeah.
Yeah. Aware of the fact that Saudi Arabia could offer a perspective that no other of the countries that are taking part of the negotiations.
Well,
since it's a country that is completely differently affected than all the other countries, for example, since it has had past threats and other conflicts happening between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Well, we believe if Saudi Arabia wants to make a deal with Iran, they should do it between the two of them and not include all of the Western world.
Granted.
So you're saying that Saudi Arabia and Iran should make a second deal for the exact same topic, just between the two of them?
Well, it isn't about the exact same topic. The tensions in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia and Iran are not caused by the nuclear agreement or them not joining it. But we believe that if Saudi Arabia wants to make a deal with Iran about, I don't know, anything, they should do it between themselves and not include all of these nations.
Request a follow-up, Shabun?
Granted.
But don't you think, doesn't the delegation think that Saudi Arabia just want to use the chance to speak to Iran by using a mediator, which is Iraq, instead of talking to them in person, since that could be kind of problematic?
Well, we believe that Saudi Arabia and Iran disagree on a lot of topics, and the United States and Iran already disagree with a lot of topics. But adding Saudi Arabia would only further slow down already very delicate process of making this deal.
Thank you. Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield it.
Egypt, you're no.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, while we as the delegation of Egypt believe that more countries should have a say on these matters, we don't believe in the randomness of this amendment to the second degree, due to the fact that it would be weird to randomly add Saudi Arabia to these negotiations when we firmly believe that several countries will have something to say on this. If this amendment is passed, nothing will stop other delegates from also adding their name to this list, and therefore we will have to hand in many agreements to this amendments to the second degree, considering that Egypt would like to have a say in this, and many other delegates would like to too. Saudi Arabia may be affected by these negotiations. However, we believe that there are several countries that will be affected by it, and Saudi Arabia is not the correct option to add to these negotiations, considering the fact that they do not have a stable economy, they do not have a stable government, and they do not add anything that other countries will not add. For example, Egypt is neutral in this conversation. We don't have any nuclear weapons, and we are trying to implement a weapon of mass destruction-free zone throughout the whole Middle East. So we believe that this amendment should not be passed due to the fact that it doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all.
Are there any points of information in the House? Saudi Arabia?
Are you aware of the fact that instead of the Iran, no other country out of this region will be there concerning these negotiations?
We are aware, yes. However, the thing that we have a problem with is that while Saudi Arabia is in this region and the other countries are not, we can agree on that. There are several countries throughout the Middle East, think of the United Arab Emirates, think of Yemen, think of Oman, that will be affected by this as well. So why would we not add them to these negotiations as well? Why would we add Saudi Arabia in particular, other than the fact that the delegate wants to?
Just to follow up.
Granted.
So which nations do you want to add to these negotiations?
We try to remain neutral in this. We do not have a preference for a specific country to be added to this. However, we believe that if Saudi Arabia desperately wants to be added to the negotiations, we should add other countries as well, as we do not want to prioritize one country when several countries are affected.
Just to follow up.
If it's short, granted.
But are you aware that even other countries can handle in an amendment to the second degree to add them?
We are aware, but then we wonder why the amendment to the second degree does not specify that other affected countries can join these negotiations, and we do not believe that it will be passed when it is solely based on Saudi Arabia. So maybe if the delegate had handed in an amendment to the second degree where it stated that other affected countries can join the negotiations, this might have been a better amendment.
Are there any more points of information in the House? USA, you have been recognized.
So we do think that it would be right if other countries also have the right to enter these negotiations. But first of all, we thought that Saudi Arabia would be one of the most important countries to enter this negotiation. So letting them first enter would be the best solution. And then afterwards we could look like at other countries who are also important but not that important as Saudi Arabia. So this was the reason why we mainly submitted Saudi Arabia.
What is the question the delegate is trying to ask?
Are you aware?
We are aware of this. However, we do not believe that Saudi Arabia is more important than other countries in this region. So we believe that if the amendment to the second degree is not passed, another amendment to the second degree might be implemented where it states that other affected countries can join the negotiations if they want to.
Request follow-up?
This will not be granted.
Come on.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs. I'm in favor, against. Against, on favor. Gute Frage. We are still in time against this amendment as a whole. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against it? Iran, you have been recognized. 50-50.
Honorable chairs, the delegates. We would like to remind the House that the negotiations between Iran and China, Russia, European Union, UK, Germany, and the United States of America, it took 20 months to negotiate everything. It all started in November 2013, and it ended in April 2015. This means it will only delay. If we add more countries, we will never get to this agreement. So, and the tensions we are facing now are happening right now. If we delay them for 20 months, all the tensions are getting out of, then we'll never be able to negotiate all of this because the tensions are right now, and tensions do not wait for 20 months. 20 months is way too much for this. If tensions happen, they happen. They just don't wait. We don't have a nuclear agreement yet. That is just not how it works. Therefore, we think it's. Therefore, we don't think Saudi Arabia. If we involve Saudi Arabia or even more countries than this, it would be unwise, because it will only take more and more time. Imagine if we add even more countries, we will never finish this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any such in the house? Please raise your placards high now. Saudi Arabia, followed by Egypt.
Are you aware of the fact that negotiating such an immersive conflict needs much time?
Yes, we are, but we would also like to remind that if it takes 20 months to negotiate, and if we now have to negotiate even when there are tensions, we think it would even take longer, and tensions don't wait until they have their time.
We were wondering whether the delegate of Iran would not agree that in the past negotiations have been made, which neither the USA nor the Iran have stuck to, and renegotiations have failed. So does the delegate not agree that maybe involving other countries as mediators can help, even though it might take a little more time, but it can help to finally agree to the negotiations that will actually remain?
We think it would, if involving more countries, would even be more complicated instead of simplifying it.
So we suggest you yield the floor back to the
So we yield it.
Thank you. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? UK, please take the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, esteemed guests. We as the delegation of the UK think there are several flaws in this amendment, which we would like to point out. First of all, why is Saudi Arabia suddenly interested in the nuclear agreement? As the Islamic Republic of Iran has already pointed out, they first did not want to be in the deals, and they did not sign the deal. So we are a bit curious about this sudden interest. Next to that, the delegation of the USA has pointed out that he will veto the previous amendment if the Saudi Arabia will not be included in the negotiations. We think that this statement already shows enough that they are close allies and that the USA will voice the needs of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has stated that his nation is affected by the nuclear agreement. However, we believe that all nations are affected by the nuclear agreement, and therefore that point lacks good argumentation. Next to that, we think that the discussion right now has already showed us enough that other nations will try to become involved as well, and that this will lead to complete chaos, and therefore we would like to keep it short. Thank you. We hope you will vote against.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any such in the house? Please raise your placards high now. United States, you've been recognized.
What the USA and Saudi Arabia try to say is that sure many countries are involved in this issue, but we think that Saudi Arabia is one of the most important countries in this issue as they are strongly affected by this problem and attacked by Iran directly. So having the right to speak in favor with these negotiations would be helpful for them, as they are one of the only countries that are not European in this negotiation.
We completely understand the concern of the delegate of the USA. However, first of all, you do not measure how affected something is. The delegate has used the word strongly.
Somalia, please.
The delegate has used the word strongly affected many times. However, another country can also claim they are strongly affected. One does not measure strongly affected with a certain skill. Next to that, seeing as the delegate of the USA is standing up for the delegate of Saudi Arabia, we think that the delegate of the USA will be happy to voice the concerns of the delegate of the USA in this issue. And therefore, we think that we should move on, close this ridiculous amendment, and find other solutions to the problem.
Request follow-up?
Granted.
We at the USA just care about about fairness, and therefore we look for other countries and hope that other countries also from the Middle East, at least one or two countries, have the right to take part in negotiations. So sure, there could be any other countries. There could be another country that is strongly affected by this problem too. But we think that first letting Saudi Arabia pass in this problem would be a good way.
Yes, we understand. We, however, would like to remind the delegate of the USA that nothing is completely fair. If it would be completely fair, then every country should be included. And we understand the point of a Middle Eastern country. However, as we already said, if Saudi Arabia is allowed to be in the agreement, then many other Middle Eastern countries will try to follow. And we think that this will lead to more chaos, which will distract us from the actual issue, which is the nuclear agreement, and not what countries are discussing is.
First follow-up.
Denied.
Every time.
Are there any more delegations wishing to make a point? Saudi Arabia?
I think the delegation of the
UK
didn't answer the question. So, do you think it's not necessary that any other countries out of the Middle East be part of these negotiations?
So
thank you for the question. We will clarify again. So we do think it is necessary. However, we already mentioned that why Saudi Arabia? The Saudi Arabia is using the argument that they are strongly affected. However, they have not said how they are strongly affected. One does not measure strongly affected on a certain scale. Therefore, we think that many Middle Eastern countries will try to follow. And as we have already mentioned twice, this will lead to more chaos and will not focus on the actual issue. Saudi Arabia and the delegate of the USA seem to be good allies, and therefore we think that their needs will be voiced through the USA. And next to that, if many Middle Eastern countries will follow, as the delegation said, then why did the delegation hand in an amendment about only himself and not about the other Middle Eastern countries, as it seems to be that important to him? Thank you.
Are there any more delegations? Egypt, you can recognize.
Like the delegate of the UK already mentioned, Saudi Arabia and the USA have strong relationships. Considering the fact that Saudi Arabia has bad relationships with Iran, would the delegate of the UK agree that the sole reason for this amendment to the second degree is that the delegate of Saudi Arabia is trying to gain power over Iran and they are not actually concerned about their own country?
Yes, we do agree. Thank you, Egypt, for pointing that out.
Are you open to any more point information?
Any and all.
United States?
What we try to point out is that we and Saudi Arabia doesn't look forward to gain power over Iran, but more to show that other countries we would agree if we change the second clause into Saudi Arabia and then other following countries, Arabic countries who would like to enter if they are involved, and we won't say strongly involved, but if they are involved, so then they can enter as well. But we think that Saudi Arabia should also enter, as they can. If Iran grows strong after this agreement, then this would harm Saudi Arabia and many other Middle East countries as well.
Yes, we do understand the point of the delegate. We first of all would like to remind him that there's no such thing as an amendment to the third degree. Therefore, we would first have to accept this one and then later debate on that. However, we think that's just a waste of time, as we have already mentioned a couple of times. It's not about who's involved, it's about solving the problem. And we believe that solving the problem should be our priority right now. And we should not spend any more time on debating what countries, because we do think we all seek for the same solution, which is a good nuclear agreement.
Just to follow up.
Granted.
But we think that if there is handed out a solution without all the Arabic countries, or at least one or two countries, then this solution would have more benefits for Iran, but nearly no benefit for any other Middle East countries. So this would solve the problem for Iran, but this would make the issue worse for any other Middle East countries. So there's no real solution without letting Saudi Arabia and any other Arabic countries enter these negotiations.
Yes, we really do understand the concern of the delegate. However, right now the delegate of the UK is speaking against the amendment of adding Saudi Arabia only. If the delegate would like to try to put in another amendment later about adding more Arab countries, then we would be happy to discuss that then. However, now we're speaking against adding Saudi Arabia.
Point of information to the House. It is possible to hand in a friendly amendment by a delegation to support to change the nature of to change the amount of countries participating in the agreement negotiations if Saudi Arabia agrees. You may.
Since it seems to us that the delegates of Saudi Arabia is so concerned that the more Middle Eastern countries have a say in this, and that they are so peaceful and humanitarian, we propose that we change it to all Middle Eastern countries except for Saudi Arabia. Since the only thing they seem to want to achieve with this amendment, as they claim themselves, is that they merely want that the Middle East has more say in this. Would this be accepted as a friendly amendment?
No.
We still need to use
Are there any more friendly amendments? Okay.
So we yield it.
Thank you. We will now be moving to voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admin staff, please take voting positions. All delegations wishing to vote in favor of this amendment to the second degree, please raise your placards high now. Thank you, you may lower. All delegations wishing to vote against this amendment to the second degree, please raise your placards high. You may lower. With an overwhelming majority, this amendment to the second degree has not passed. Clapping is not in order. We're now back in time against this amendment as a whole without the second degree. Is there any delegation wishing to speak against this amendment? Then we are moving into voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admins, please keep voting position.
Point of information to the House. We already voted on this and we already passed it.
Yes, there was another second.
Ah, okay, so that is true. Then we don't have to vote on it. Then we will entertain the next amendment in a few moments. Iran. Okay, super. We will now entertain the amendment handed in by Iran. Iran, please come to the front and read out your amendment. You may start.
Request all countries to put an end to import and export taxes on Iran on the following condition. Iran will not have export sanctions on oil with all UN members. With all UN members. Honorable chairs, dear delegates, the tensions between USA and Iran are quite high, and by this means we want to reduce it while benefiting all countries all over the world. At the moment, there's a lot of import taxes imposed by the United States of America. For example, on oil, gold, and aeroplanes, and this is a huge part of of Iran's economy, and therefore we would like to end these taxes and grow and move into the right, put a step into the right direction. And as the United States will have to pay less taxes, we'll think it will benefit them because they will have to pay less money. And we do not see the point of anyone voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high now. Syria, you've been recognized.
Does the delegate of Iran believe that this will be discussed in the nuclear agreement?
No, since the only thing we voted on is that we renegotiate, but we never have anything in there. It's not. There's nothing really. There's no. We don't know. We do not think so.
Are there any more points in the House? Seeing if there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
Would like to yield the floor to India if accepted.
That is granted.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, first and foremost, we would like to compliment Iran for initiating such brilliant amendment, as it is an amendment that is based on giving and taking, and we believe that that is one of the main goals of the United Nations, as we're here to come to solutions together and not only to speak for our own interests. So compliments for that. Yes, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Are you open to any points of information?
Any?
Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards high. Saudi Arabia, you can recognize.
The delegate of India said that it's about giving and taking. What does the delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran give to you?
Iran gives Iran. Can I say all the countries with sanctions? Here, Iran will not have export sanctions on oil with all UN members. That's what it gives.
Are there any more points in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you please go ahead and chairs. Thank you. We are currently in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to speak in favor? Please raise your placards. Do I hear a motion to move into time against? Any objections? Then we'll be moving into time against. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? Please raise your placards. Rise and state your point.
This resolution is not really true, because if Iran wouldn't, or actually if operative, or if A would be true, then Iran wouldn't even have an economy. So the major export of Iran is actually oil, and if they would sanction other UN members to not export their oil, it just doesn't make sense. They already export their oil, so they're not sanctioning anyone. No.
It is misunderstood. America is sanctioning the oil, not Iran.
Yes. That's what's happening.
There are sanctions imposed on Iran, so they can't trade their oil with the world.
It's not like Iran is not selling to the US. It's like the US saying to Iran, you can't sell us oil.
Yes.
That's what's going on.
Thank you, Iraq. Iran, do you want to change the amendment and resubmit it? Or do you want to
yes.
still vote on it?
Yeah, we can vote if it passes. It passes. But I think the outcome will be clear, so no.
Okay, then we'll now proceed into voting positions. Admin staff, please take voting positions. Note passing is suspended.
Note passing is suspended for the moment.
Cannot abstain from voting.
All delegations wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placards. All delegations wishing to vote against, you may lower with an overwhelming majority. This amendment has not passed. Clapping is not in order.
Als dat gelukt was ik echt matching.
Second degree. Das ist aber leider jetzt gefailt, weil es auch gefailt ist. United States, your amendment failed because the original one also failed. It is the second degree.
You can just copy this point and put it also into the normal amendment, and then you can hand it in.
Do you want to still impose it? Do you want to? Yeah, then I can just add it. Okay, then we're as a amendment. Wir möchten das jetzt nicht wegnehmen. Nein. Wir brauchen noch some Zeit für. Richtig. Okay. Spelled by USA. Second degree, we desire.
While the other chair is putting on the new amendment from the USA, a little information, it would be good if every delegate is thinking about some superlatives for later, because otherwise we cannot vote on anything if no one has an idea for it.
Rise and state your point.
on them and then we vote on the.
Yes, we know, but I think Oh, on the support.
We desire to lead countries such as, but unlimited just enter the negotiations.
Yeah. Rise and state your points. You may.
Das ist beeindruckend. Komm jetzt. Ja, da steht nicht, wo wir das einfügen sollen. Ja, das wird dann USB passen. Since he is directly affected, no. Ui. First Amendment, von dem kam es.
Who handed in this amendment right now? Okay.
Ah, wer auch sonst. One of the few people who are really using these amendment sheets. Ja. Und schreiben keinen anderen. Countries such as unlimited to say are allowed to enter. Are allowed to enter the negotiations. Okay. Ich weiß an. Okay. Ich werf's an. Ja, jetzt machen wir zuerst das. Und dann haben wir den Second Degree für den ersten.
We will now entertain an amendment handed in by the USA, adding some points to the further amendment. Please come to the front.
We had a similar amendment a few minutes ago, and as many delegates said, we need to change this amendment so that not Saudi Arabia but more countries of the Middle East are involved as well. So here it is. Yes.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Two.
Two. Are there any such in the House? Please raise your placards. Syria followed by UK.
No,
Iraq, sorry, Iraq followed by UK.
We were wondering why the delegation of America put in his in his amendment, such as but not limited to. So so does that mean that you're actually like not opposing more members? We actually think that if we allow more and more people to take part in this agreement, it will only get more and more difficult to actually come to a resolution.
But
Can the delegation comment on this?
As we said a few minutes ago, that if we don't let these Arabic countries and of the Middle East enter the negotiations, then the solution that will come at the end won't be a solution that bring benefits to any of these Middle East countries except Iran. So that, if we don't let them enter this negotiation, the solution won't be good.
Okay.
We were wondering if the delegate is aware that such as but not limited to serves as merely an example, which means that the delegation of Saudi Arabia will not necessarily be included. Is the delegation aware, as it seems to be strongly in favor of the inclusion of the delegate of Saudi Arabia?
Well, it might be that we made a mistake. So, yeah, our main message was to, as we talked a few seconds ago, that you were criticizing that that would be unfair if just Saudi Arabia enters as, then that would be also okay if the other countries enter as well. So we thought with this new amendment it would be another help. It would be a help and would be accepted by more people, by more delegates.
Request for follow-up.
Granted.
We were also wondering, why did the delegation include it in the second amendment we have standing right now? Because we, as a delegation of the UK, do not see how it's directly linked to the import and export taxes, because the second amendment discusses the trade sanctions the countries have on each other. So why did the delegate include it as a condition of the import and export taxes?
We actually wanted to send this amendment a little earlier, and as this amendment above passed, we had no other solution than sending it now.
Okay.
Are there any more delegations wishing?
I just had to confirm.
Then we suggest you the floor back to the chairs.
Motion to table the amendment.
Second. Objection. Motion to discuss our amendments.
We will entertain this.
Scrap. Short moment.
As an information, there will only be one in favor and one against allowed.
Okay. Hey Ben, you seeing this? Ben. Oh, you can hear me now. Ben. Are you okay, Ben? Don't say anything if you.
I would like to inform the delegate of China that he has not to whisper with our technical crew, please.
I'm not doing anything. Keep it up, Ben.
Yeah, but
it
anyway,
is
we
being
are-
filmed and recorded and will be posted on Sunday. Ah, can you also put the entire, like everything somewhere? Even the.
Please start China.
Okay. Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we have handed the amendment to change clause B of clause 2 to all.
One moment.
All countries but Saudi Arabia, and allow us to elaborate. It seems to us that Saudi Arabia only has noble intentions, for they have multiple times claimed that their sole intention of handing in these amendments is simply that they want the Middle East to have more power and so that the Middle East can voice their own voices as well in the negotiations. However, what baffles us is that this amendment has the word negotiations in the second clause, and as the delegate of the United Kingdom also pointed out, it somehow is supposed to refer to the first clause. However, since it is not in the first clause, it cannot refer to the first clause. So this means all negotiations of the United Nations. So if we were to pass this amendment, we can officially suspend Saudi Arabia from this debate, and therefore we suggest everyone to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open for any points of information?
7.
Russian Federation, you have been recognized.
Has the delegation of China forgotten that the intention of Saudi Arabia was not to include all countries, but to have countries in a similar situation as Saudi Arabia, which were Middle East countries, which are directly affected by this conflict, to have them included and not just all countries, which we have spoken about, would just make this discussion quite a mess, since it will be very hard to coordinate such a large discussion.
Well, although we can agree upon the part that will be hard to coordinate, it still will achieve the goals the Saudi Arabian delegate had in mind, namely the Middle East can voice their opinion as well. However, the reason we handed in this amendment is because it includes the word negotiations in the second clause, even though it is somehow supposed to refer to the first clause. However, since it is not in the first clause, it refers to all negotiation in general, and we believe that all countries have a right to attend negotiations of the United Nations. I mean, at this very moment, all nations attend the United Nations negotiations anyway, because that's the point of the United Nations. So the delegates somehow indirectly saying that nations no longer have a right to attend the United Nations. So our goal by handing in this amendment to the second degree is simply to suspend Saudi Arabia from the debate. Thank you for your comment.
USA, you have been recognized.
But like we, the USA, have struggled to understand this correction, as we think that it would be better to write down all countries but China are allowed to enter the negotiations, as we don't see the reason why Saudi Arabia isn't allowed to enter this negotiation, and why other countries like China have an issue with this.
It seems to us that the United States of America is misunderstanding a few things. First of all, This does not refer to the negotiations that are specified in Clause 1. This refers to all United Nations negotiations, since this is not a subpoint of Clause 1, but of Clause 2, which does not refer to any negotiations, so we can therefore assume that it refers to all United Nations negotiations. Furthermore, we as China are a permanent member of the United Nations, so it is impossible to suspend us from the Security Council or any other United Nations negotiation, even if they wanted to do so.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any more points of information in the House? Russian Federation?
But how is not including Saudi Arabia part of the intention of Saudi Arabia? I mean, since it wanted to include more countries, how is excluding it itself in that sense logical?
Although it may not fully be within the intention of Saudi Arabia, we still believe that Saudi Arabia has been an obstacle in the previous, 2 hours of our debate, and it has hampered the progress of the United Nations Security Council, which we deem as a possible threat to world negotiations. So therefore we believe that this will allow the negotiations to proliferate once again in order to restore the former peace and normal debates in the United Nations. Thank you.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chair.
So we yield it. Objection.
Are there any objections? Then the amendment of the second degree.
Wir müssen abstimmen.
So, okay. Who is in? Which delegations are in favor of this tabling? Please raise your placards high now. No, you cannot abstain. Nein, über second degree. Tabling wird, dass es wegkommt. We now know only the second degree. We're tabling the second degree. Yes. All delegations wishing to vote in favor of tabling the second degree, please raise your placards high now. Yes, only the red part. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All delegations wishing to vote against tabling the amendment.
Exercise our veto.
That's not how that works.
No, it's not.
No, it's not vote. It's not.
No. You don't. Muss eh nicht was.
Because of a majority, this second degree amendment will be tabled. So, weg damit.
Ja.
Wo sind wir dann? Immer noch Gegenphase. We're now back in time against this amendment as a whole, handed in by the USA. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment? Please raise your placard. Could the delegations of the Russian Federation, USA and Saudi Arabia please be quiet?
Shut the fuck up.
Dominik, machst die Tür vielleicht auch zu? Rise up and say.
Yeah.
For this
Friendly amendment.
Yeah, this was like to change the last one. Sorry, allowed to enter the negotiations concerning the nuclear
Negotiations concerning nuclear
power. This was like
no, nuclear power, nuclear
disagreement, nuclear agreements.
International negotiations at the nuclear agreement. Wo? Where?
Iran. Iran. This will not be granted if you're trying this.
Countries such as but not allowed to
This will not be granted if you're trying
concerning
to
the,
yield the floor to
nuclear
another state
agreements.
like the one you mentioned. Yes? Rise up and state your point. Yes. Fister. Yes.
Ist er gefragt?
Fertig?
Ja.
Von wem wird das eingereicht?
Friendly amendment von den USA.
Order in the house, please. We received a friendly amendment by the USA. Please state this friendly amendment, because I don't know what is
As it was criticized by China that this amendment wouldn't
China.
This was criticized by China that if we don't add something like the nuclear agreement, then this wouldn't wouldn't have any function, as it wasn't stated in the first amendment. So we want to add this friendly amendment to show that Saudi Arabia should take part in the negotiations for the nuclear agreements.
Thank you, delegate. Are there any points of information in the House?
Open for one. I'm open for one.
Open for one. Rise up, state your point. Rise up and state your point.
What was actually changed here? Can you please be highlighted?
That's my question.
Concerning the nuclear agreement was added.
Something added.
This one, yeah.
Iran.
You mentioned that the United States really wants Saudi Arabia in this agreement, but the clause states countries such as, but not limited to. That just means that Saudi Arabia is just an example, but it could be any country. It could be Egypt as well, because you say such as is limited to. You can't just give a random example, so it doesn't specify anything. So we don't really see the point of this clause. Is the delegation aware of this?
Well, what we meant was to, I think we need to fix this one. We won't comment on that.
What's
Thank you.
We just had one point.
Yes, as the delegation was only open for one point of information, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs. Thank you. We're now
Second.
Yeah, we're now moving into time against this amendment.
Second.
Objection. Why?
We're now in time against this amendment as a whole. Are there
Order, please.
Are there
Order,
any
please.
No. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment as a whole? UK.
Maar dit is echt hier, dit niet willen. Ik vind het
Followed by Egypt.
Hier wil je het niet over gaan praten. Het is over India.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, esteemed guests. We as the delegation of the UK agree on, with most of you that this is a stupid amendment. However, we feel
Please
that we
abstain
should...
from unusual language.
Not so smart amendment. However, we still think we should explain to the delegates who handed in this amendment why this is the case. Because otherwise we will continue this cycle of amendments that we all do not like and wish to move into voting procedure immediately. And this is why we would like to say why this amendment does not belong here. This amendment states that... Okay. This amendment adds to the clause B. Countries such as but not limited to, which we already explained, is not really a good example, are allowed to enter the negotiations concerning the nuclear agreement. It does not have anything to do with the second amendment, because the second amendment focuses on import and export taxes and on the agreement. If we would like to discuss the agreement again, then we should do that in amendment 1, not 2. Therefore, this is just not smart to do.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any points of information in the House? USA, you have been recognized.
Are you aware of the fact that we tried to put this clause number B at the first amendment, and this first amendment passed so fast that we couldn't add this one? So we need to add this at the second, even though it doesn't fit to the topic of the second amendment, but otherwise there won't be any solution that we would fix that.
We would like to say to the delegate of the USA, the delegate of Saudi Arabia, and the whole ally thing, that if they want to add the Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries into the agreement, they should wait before we have discussed the second amendment, and then they add it to the first amendment. You don't. If the delegate states that they tried to put it in the first amendment, they could also simply just have wait, and then we could later discuss the agreement again. So now let's just talk about the import taxes and not about the agreement. It's just simply putting another subject into a discussion that we're having.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you give the floor back to the chairs. We're now moving into voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admins, please keep voting position. Any delegations wishing to vote in favor of this amendment as a whole, please raise your plackets high now. Okay. Any delegations in favor?
Vote in favor.
Now.
In favor of what?
The whole amendment.
The whole, wait, no.
Okay.
It's your
You-
amendment.
you-
It's your amendment.
You handed in the amendment and now
The whole
about the whole amendment which is standing right there.
Your amendment. Calm down, bro.
Order please, order. Any delegations, you may lower. Any delegations wishing to vote against this amendment, please raise your plackets high. Now. Thank you, you may lower. With an overwhelming majority, this amendment has not passed. Granted. May the House please come to order.
Wir haben noch eins von Irak.
Von wem? We will now entertain an amendment handed in by Iraq. Please come to the front and explain your amendment.
Kurze Sekunde.
You're rocking it. This amendment already
No, not yet.
Wait a little moment.
Are you China say I should commit suicide?
Lass erstmal rausgehen. So.
Warte man. Danke.
Das war ursprünglich auch von Irak, ne? Ja. Und das ist ein Friendly Amendment. Ja, ist egal. Ja. Jetzt komm. Ja, gut. Rein da. Der Amerikaner hat Ärger drin.
May the House please come to order. The delegation of Iraq would like to present their amendment.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, as we said in our previous speech about the First Amendment, this only provides a framework, so we want to expand on that. And we actually think that with these additions to the amendment, that we can actually make a good framework on which we can build, on which we can make a proper new deal, which both sides can agree on. I've actually talked to the delegation of the United States and the delegation of Iran, and I think that both can agree on this. So we have a good framework on which we can expand. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate, are you open for any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any points of information in the House? Egypt.
Does the delegate also think that there should be someone who checks up on whether the US is actually complying to the deal?
Yeah. I think that's also a good addition, and maybe if the delegation could add that as a second degree, we would support it.
Request for follow-up?
Granted.
Does the delegate then believe that Iran should be the ones who check up on whether the US is complying to the deal, or should it be another country?
As we are ourselves a neutral force, I think we can also take on this position.
Please abstain from personal problems.
Okay.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chair.
So we yield it.
We're now in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? Syria, please come to the front.
heeft gewoon zo'n motion to make it agreement. It's niet destructive in nature. Yeah,
Wait a moment. Who handed in this amendment of the second degree?
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, adopting this amendment will assure that this deal will contain fair and fair requirements. So we believe that adopting this amendment is only for the greater good.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
One.
Is there a point of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So
we are still in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? Use up, please come to the front.
So we do think that this is
Chairs, the delegates.
Yeah, both. Okay. Honorable Chair, esteemed fellow delegates, so we really think that this amendment is quite helpful, and we have no problem with the Iraqi with some Iraqi personnel to check on if we also comply with the deal. But we think that like we would just want to highlight that we're looking for a peace treaty with the Iranian government, and we are not the country who is looking for war. We are open for one point of information.
Thank you, Delegate. Is there a point of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you
The floor
yield
is
the floor
yielded.
to the Chair. Is there any other delegation wishing to speak in favor of this amendment?
Second.
We're now moving into time against. Is there any delegation wishing to speak against this? We can entertain this, yes. Let's go.
Honorable Chair, dear delegates, allow us to explain. As history tells us, we as a delegation of Iran do not have trust in the United States anymore when it comes to nuclear, when it comes to this point. So we refuse to accept the checking above nuclear personnel because of the history, the difficult history the United States and Iran have had. So therefore, we would like to have United Nations nuclear personnel instead, because we think it would be more fair. It would be better for both countries to decrease the tensions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any at all?
Are there any points of information in the House? Iraq, you have been recognized.
By changing US to UN, this would actually make the deal the same deal that it was before. So it's actually the comprehensive cooperation agreement which the United States left. So we thought to add an additional concession. So the US is actually happy about this new deal. Are you aware of this fact?
Yes, we are aware of that, but we're not happy that we're still not happy for U.S. troops for U.S. personnel to check us. We just don't want that.
Request for a follow-up?
Granted.
But we wanted to add to an amendment to the second degree, in which a neutral force actually checks whether the U.S. personnel is actually saying the truth.
If that passes, yes, we would be happy because we do not see the United States of America as a neutral. We don't see them as neutral, but rather biased when it comes to the Iran-USA relation.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as there are none, we suggest you yield the floor back to the chairs.
So we yield it.
We're now in time in favor of this amendment. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? UK, you have been recognized.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, we believe that the delegation of Iran has made a really good point by adding this amendment to the second degree. The US has showed over the past couple of years that they have no problem with breaking into the sovereignty of certain countries, and therefore we think they shall not be trusted with checking the Iranians, and therefore we think that the UN is a great organ to do this. The delegation of Iraq has already said that he might want another organ to be checking the US who's checking Iran, but we just think this will simply be too difficult. Why don't we just check them with the UN? It's a great solution to a simple problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Are there any points of information in the House? Iraq?
Is the delegation of the United Kingdom aware that this was part of the concession that the US wanted to be part of the deal, so they could agree on it? And if we change the nature of it, then maybe the US wouldn't agree and would be at zero again.
Yes, we do understand what the delegation of Iraq is pointing out. However, we as the delegation of the UK are not here to please the delegation of the US, and therefore we think that we should come up for what we believe in, and we think that this is a good idea. And we might go a step back, but the delegation of Iraq cannot be certain about this because the delegation of the US might change their minds because of what's being said.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as none, we suggest you fall back to the
So
chairs.
here
Interpersonal privilege. Granted. Granted.
Oh, and my vote is in favor of this in any way, shape, or form.
No. Okay. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment? To the second degree. Do I hear a motion to come into time against? Then we will move into time against. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against this amendment of the second degree? USA, you have been recognized.
So we first thought that sending US nuclear personnel would be a good step in the right, would be a good step, but we think that sending UN nuclear personnel is a sign of the UK and Iran that they don't trust the US anymore, and we first of all, we could also have agreed on not doing any negotiations with Iran, but as we are a good country and we look for peace in the whole world, we decided to do this whole negotiation. So letting the UN troops instead of US troops to send UN instead of US troops into this area shows us that Iran is trying to hide something. So we won't accept this.
Thank you, delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
One.
Iran, yes.
You said that the delegation of the United States claims that the United States of America is such
Entschuldigung für die Störung. Dies ist eine Durchsage für alle Lehrerinnen und Lehrer und alle Schülerinnen und Schüler. Wir haben eine Nachricht bekommen von der Stadt Neuss. Und zwar wird es auf der zu erwartenden Wetterlage am Sonntag und Montag werden die Schulen in Neuss geschlossen bleiben aufgrund von Sturm- und Orkanböen. Das heißt, dass am Montag in Neuss alle Schulen geschlossen bleiben, in Absprache mit der Bezirksregierung, der Feuerwehr und der Stadt Neuss.
Yes.
Es wird eine Info geben auf der Homepage über den Elternverteiler und nochmal an die Kolleginnen und Kollegen, aber dies ist schon mal die Info vorab.
Even if the Dutch people doesn't understand it,
Vielen Dank.
clapping is in order for this. Could the delegate please rephrase his sentence for the delegation of the USA?
Yes, please.
The delegation of the United States claims that the United States is such a nice and lovely country, and that, as I quote them, that they look for peace. We completely disagree with this. We again have to remind you, just as yesterday, that the United States of America has killed our great general Soleimani. How is it ever looking for peace?
This is quite easy.
I was not finished yet. I was not finished yet.
We
I
are
was
sorry.
not finished yet because we do not think that attacking someone with drones is looking for peace. You're just looking for, that's more looking for tensions rather than looking for war.
So, this is
peace.
There's an easier answer on this question somehow. First of all, we killed this terrorist to save the peace in the Middle East, and this wasn't an innocent civilian. So first of all, killing him was the right way, as we wanted to save the Middle East and to enhance the Middle East. So first of all, was your fault to let this man do his not smart tactics in your country. And secondly, we want to say that this amendment is just rude and shouldn't be accepted.
Request for formal apology since the United States mentions our great General Soleimani a terrorist.
Granted.
We refuse. We don't. You want? Excuse me. Could you rephrase your sentence?
You want to apologize
we won't apologize for the truth. Oh, yeah. That's fine.
Um, we were wondering whether the delegation actually also is aware that the US is part of the UN, and therefore the UN will come up for their values and with their beliefs as well, and therefore we do not understand, is the delegation implementing that they do not trust the UN, which they are a part of themselves?
No, we do trust the UN, and we are part of the UN, and we are proud of this, but we think that the US troops are more than enough to not control, but to observe the situation there, and we don't understand the issue with replacing US personnel with UN personnel if the US personnel is doing their job maybe as good as the UN personnel.
Request for follow-up. Doesn't the delegation of the US understand that maybe for them it's better to have US personnel checking, but for all the other countries involved it's better to have UN personnel checking, which is actually a compromise because it means that the US personnel will still be there just as part of the UN, which means that they will for sure be neutral. And how can the delegation not comprehend that it's a better solution for everyone as everyone will be involved?
So first of all, we think that sending US troops has one benefit. First of all, like if we send US troops, we aren't forced to do these negotiations at all. So we could just so we had to accept this amendment at first, and so sending US troops is like to show that we still don't trust Iran for sure. So sending US troops it's the only smart way the US could react on this issue, and we think if the Iran earned our trust again, then we will maybe replace the US personnel with UN personnel, but this needs time.
Request for follow-up.
No, please.
Granted? The troops will still be checked. Whether it's UN personnel or US personnel, doesn't the delegation understand that in any way information will come to the US, whether it's the US checking them or the UN? So what's the difference to the US as it doesn't make a difference?
So if you try to say that the US and the UN nuclear personnel would do the same job, so like this would mean it would make no difference if the US troops would send there, if we understand you right. So we don't understand this amendment at all if apparently it doesn't make any difference. So why is Iran so strongly convinced to send UN troops instead of US troops if it doesn't make any difference?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more points of information in the House? India, you have to recognize.
Once again, I would like to maybe rephrase the question the delegate of the United Kingdom has asked the United States. Why specifically does the United States of America want its own troops instead of the UN? What sort of, how would I say that? What privilege or what will you win for that?
There's an easy answer on this question. First of all, we don't trust Iran, and this is like everyone knows it. So sending US troops gives us a little bit of safety to know that the things are going on the right way. Even though the UN will do the same job, we think that sending US troops should be accepted by Iran, as we also accepted to the negotiations again. Thank you.
Are there any more points of information in the House?
Egypt, come on.
The delegate of the United States mentioned that they do not trust Iran. However, isn't that the whole point of the United Nations troops checking upon whether they actually comply with the deal?
Yes, but we, as we said a few seconds ago, would feel safer if we send our own troops, even though we don't say that the UN troops wouldn't make the same job, and we trust the UN for sure, but we think that this is also a way to show that the US doesn't trust Iran. So sending US troops, and as everyone said, they don't make a difference in quality. So where's the problem to send US troops, in your opinion?
Granted.
Thing is that there are American people working for the UN too. So chances are big that UN nuclear personnel will also involve Americans, and the delegation of the USA will also gain the information that the UN gathers because they are a big country and a big member of the United Nations. However, in order to get everyone to agree with this, with these negotiations, a change was made by the delegation of Iran in order to send UN nuclear personnel instead of US. The delegate himself is saying that it doesn't make a difference. So then why would we not try to make these negotiations acceptable for everyone instead of only complying to what the US delegate
This
wants?
is false. We never said that this does make any difference, as we highlighted many times that this gives the US a feeling of safety, and we're pretty sure that everyone heard this. And we said that first of all, we tried to bring, like for example, Saudi Arabia and many other countries into these negotiations, and the country, many delegates denied this. So denying this one as well brings us into the same agreement that we left. So why should we agree on this whole resolution at the end?
A request for follow-up?
Instead of just using our veto right.
Information to the House.
Raise up and say that.
We believe our point was misinterpreted by the USA as well as the delegation of Egypt. What we stated is that it doesn't make a difference to the US, but it does make a difference to us. So it means that there is a difference, but it's not for the delegation of the US.
Right to reply since we've been mentioned. We actually understand the point, and that's why we're trying to make clear to the USA that for them it changes everything. However, for the it doesn't change anything except for the trust, and for the United Nations it actually doesn't matter who checks upon Iran. So we did interpret it the correct way.
And again, why should the US accept such a deal if this is like completely similar to the one that we left? Where is the benefit for the US?
A request for follow-up? There's a benefit for the US considering that they will gain the information and they will actually know whether Iran is complying with the deal, regardless of whether the troops are US troops or UN troops. So in order to gain everyone's trust and in order to actually negotiate with Iran, this amendment should be changed, because otherwise the negotiations will fall through again, and the US delegate will never know whether they actually comply with the deal. And this way they will know.
And this wouldn't be our problem. If the negotiations want success, then we tried at least to help, and otherwise we can just use our sanctions on Iran. We don't have any problem with that.
Are there any more points of information in the House?
How many?
You have been recognized.
What does the delegation of the USA really want to change in a new nuclear agreement?
There are many things that we wish to change. This is one of many points we have, and actually the points that passed also not quite as we desired them to be. But first of all, we would, as one can see, send US troops instead of UN troops. On the other hand, there are other amendments that will come later, and then you might see what the wishes of the US government are.
Are there any more points of information in the House?
The floor is still there.
Seeing as there are none, we suggest we leave the floor back. We're still in time against this amendment as a whole. Are there any more delegations wishing to speak against it?
No second degree, huh?
Yeah. We're now voting over the whole amendment. If the second degree passes, the whole amendment passes. Every delegation wishing to vote in favor of this amendment, please raise your placard high now.
For this correction or for the whole one?
For the whole one. But we noticed that we have to wait because China, as a P5 member, is not here.
So we will conduct a short in-committee break until China arrives. So dann bin ich auf Toilette. Ja. Ja. Ja, bitte.
Wir wollten ja US-Städte und Truppen reinschicken. Das heißt, kann ich jetzt nicht mein Veto rechnen, um diesen Vorschlag vom UN wegzubekommen.
Nein, weil wir das ganze Ding abstimmen.
Das heißt, wenn ich jetzt mein Veto nutze, ist das ganze Ding weg.
Richtig. Kannst du nicht mit UN-Truppen leben?
Gar nicht, nein.
Gar nicht.
Also ich meine, ich musste ja nicht mal überhaupt diese Verhandlungen annehmen, aber dann noch, dass das so ähnlich wird wie der andere Vertrag, ist für mich fast eine Absage. Da ich Donald Trump vertrete, kann ich das nicht zulassen.
Aber du musst ja auch dafür sorgen, dass der Rest der internationalen Welt dich auch anerkennt und ihr müsst ja auf eine gemeinsame Lösung hinarbeiten. Da muss man vielleicht mal Kompromisse eingehen.
Die gemeinsame Lösung ist zu stark vom Einfluss von Iran abhängig und das Problem ist,
Aber die UN ist ja unabhängig.
Ja, ich weiß, aber durch diese Diskussion hat man gemerkt, dass der Iran fast alle Punkte sind mehr für den Front Iran. Zum Beispiel gab es keine anderen Middle East Länder außer Iran in den Negotiations. Das ist schon ein großer Beweis, dass Iran so viel macht und dann auch noch.
Das heißt, ja gut, aber okay, aber die UN hat da nichts mit zu tun.
Ja, aber wenn.
Ja, du kannst ja weitere Amendments einreichen.
Ja, kann ich, aber die werden ja genauso weit. Aus dem Grund kann ich sowas der US-Regierung nicht antworten.
Aber wenn du das jetzt vetost,
ja,
dann hast du wenig Verbündete in diesem Komitee.
Ja, kann ich sehen. Ich hab immer Vetorecht. Und ich bin ein Arzt.
We have a crisis. Who says that? For who? Is it yours?
I just forget the right names.
Okay, we will read it and consider it if appropriate. No terrorists orders from the right in the middle of the city of Washington D.C. Civilians, right civilians, contribution to the U.S. to slow money. China and India have already publicly declared to eject war. Germany will back Iran as well. This doesn't use the check. Ja, genau.
Yes, yeah, that's one. Do you think it will pass? We'll start the crisis now.
I will debate it with my co-chair, and we will do so if appropriate and right at this time. But first we will debate further on this amendment.
Okay.
And perhaps this one.
Okay.
That depends on the outcome of the first. But we'll consider this.
And another question: if that crisis happens,
yes,
and if it is starting to really roll off,
yeah,
can I use this one, which I have been working on for a while now? It's an autopsy report of the Delegate of America, and then it's like a mystery for like who is the culprit, and then we'll have to debate who the culprit is. It's like coroner's verdict and the evidence right there.
28 step wounds, but here it says.
Yeah, but this is Washington. I mean, like this is the actual delegate.
The actual delegate is there.
Yes.
Ah.
It also happened in another committee.
What?
Can I share on Drive, perhaps?
On Drive?
Yes. Google Drive.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah? Okay.
You could also send me an email.
Yes, of course, it's also possible. Then, to which email do I need to send? I still have to add just a couple of things.
Yeah.
But then I can send it when it's finished.
Wo ist der Ladestecker?
One second. But don't take it for granted.
Okay, yes, just in case.
Yes.
Thank you. He tries to veto this amendment to the second degree. Is the entire thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about right now. I'm not quite sure.
Can't you just veto?
I think if it's vetoed, only the UN thing disappears. But I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, because that wouldn't make any sense that I destroy like the. That's
Yeah.
not
But
Messiah.
if you go on, even if like against it, they also don't remove everything.
No, you're right. You're right.
Right, this.
So I think if the United States are applying their veto right, the UN changes to US again.
Yeah, great.
And then I think your amendment will apply. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Zwei erst.
Bin ich schon darunter?
Nein, den Russia. Weil der Turnschuh hat.
Yeah, we actually have one. Yeah, we're talking everything is delayed because.
Yeah, lunch is delayed about 20 to 30 minutes. So. Yeah, Yes, you may. But yeah, okay. Yeah, you may.
It's like minor we have one everywhere.
Bad constructor. I don't know. Bad constructor.
Actually, German school, every German school shitty.
Wir haben mehrere Inputs. Wir haben eine Crisis vorgelegt bekommen. Vom Iran. Und anscheinend hat China mit dran gearbeitet, einen ganzen Bericht dazu veröffentlicht, den er mir gleich schicken will. Können wir uns ja mal anschauen.
Wir sind doch nicht mal durch mit dem Thema.
Nee, sind wir noch nicht. Aber
also gut, dann legen wir
also die Crisis ist direkt in das USA-Iran-Ding mit eingeflochten.
Ja, aber ich würde trotzdem lieber das
Ich würde das erstmal beenden, ja.
Wie lange ist die Pause? Bis alle von der Toilette wieder da sind.
Aber das ist Toilette.
Wow!
Yes, but I
ich werde die Punishment.
Echt?
Ja, ich schwöre sogar.
Somalia?
Ja.
Two different shoes. Oh,
Ja,
this is
ja.
embarrassing. He noticed that.
Ja, weil das das gefetzt hat.
Yeah, we were in a hurry today and therefore.
Well.
Yeah, this is funny.
Syrien oder noch? Russland?
I've got a question, like, if I, also auf Deutsch, wenn ich jemand verpetze, kriegt er auch Punishments?
Das kommt darauf an. Vielleicht kriegst dann du auch eins, weil du verpetzt.
Hä, warum? Ich bin sowieso die Snitch hier die ganze Zeit. Egal. Ich würde schon gerne irgendwie Iran was anhängen, muss ich zugeben.
Iran?
Das kratzt mir schon irgendwie den Fingern.
Was denn?
Ich überlege noch, ich muss gleich gucken. Ich hab das
Ich werde ja so oder so gepuncht, da kann ich ja irgendwas sagen, keine Ahnung. Zu respektlos.
Was denn?
Können wir ihn punishen, weil die Krawatte nicht zu dem restlichen passt?
Nein, dafür soll es kein Punishment geben.
Argument
Können wir ihn
don't make
punishen,
sense.
weil er sein Veto benutzt hat, ohne eine Erklärung davor.
Nein, das darf man ja.
Nachdem wir schon zweimal gesagt hatten, dass man das so eigentlich nicht machen
Ja, wir machen weiter. Wir können ihn punishen, aber dass er Snitch ist.
Nein, man darf dann. Einer muss ja die Snitch sein, das macht keinen Spaß.
Ja. Wir schauen mal.
Was heißt das?
Order now, please. We will continue.
Ja. Iran is getting a punishment.
Come on, boys. Punishment. Come on, boys.
No. Shit.
May the house please come to order.
Wir stimmen jetzt ab, ne?
Ja. Please, may the house please come to order. Syria. We're now in voting procedure. We are voting about the second degree amendment. When the second degree amendment passes, the whole amendment passes. Every delegation wishing to vote in favor of this, please raise your placard high now. Okay, please lower down. May lower down. Every delegation wishing to vote against the second. While the delegation of the United States of America uses their veto, the second degree. You don't have to explain it. The second degree amendment will not pass. Now we're back in time against the whole amendment, excluding. I heard there is a friendly amendment coming in. No? Herr Risto, was möchten Sie?
Zuschauen, denke ich.
Okay, das
Okay.
okay, there will be a lot of people coming in now.
Welcome our guests.
Yeah. Hopefully everyone will welcome then if he's at the front desk. Come in. Come in.
Okay, was machen wir jetzt?
Okay.
Wir haben eins bekommen vom Iran.
Ja, warte. So welcome our guests. Please keep the camera behind you. Open. Perfect. Thank you. We're now in time against the amendment handed in by Iraq. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against? We will entertain this. Is this already here? Yep. Okay, good. Yeah, then we will entertain it. Please come to the front.
Class C. Checks whether the US is speaking the truth about.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, the delegation of Egypt has some really honest and noble critique about our amendment, and we believe that it needed some further clarification. And
one more, please. Would you please approach the chairs? Thank you.
Sorry.
It states that Iraq will check whether the Iranians are.
oh no, I
compliant
mean
to
America, with America.
the Americans, but it already states that the US is checking whether the Iranians.
The point was like that they're going to check Iran, and then Egypt said, well, who's going to check whether the Americans will be honest about the
So
situation?
Iraq will check
whether
US.
because I'm neutral, and I will check the US personnel whether they're honest.
Okay, approves that.
So we believe that this amendment that we have ended in speaks really for itself when you can see it on the board. Yeah. It was just what he said. So he's
It
gonna
will be
check.
displayed in a few moments.
I'm open to any points of information. No, not control.
Yeah, check.
Or check, yeah.
Thank you, delegate, for your speech. Are there any delegations with points of information in the House? Egypt, you have been recognized.
The delegate of Iraq seemed to misunderstand what the delegation of Egypt was saying. What we meant with the initial critique was that we were wondering whether Iranian personnel was allowed to check whether the US was complying to the deal, not whether the US was checking the Iranians in the correct way, rather that they both get checked by neutral forces.
Oh, okay.
While we also agree with this amendment to the second degree, it was not what we initially meant, so we would like to clear that up.
Oh, okay, yeah, we understand what you are saying, but we believe that when Iraq and the US enter in discussion for whether which side is has if both sides if both sides enter into a discussion who's right, then the Iraq will step in and show or point fingers who's right. So that's what we meant with this resolution. We fully understand you.
Are there any more points of information in the House? Seeing as none, we suggest we yield back the floor to the chair.
So we yielded.
We're now in time in favor of this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to speak in favor of this amendment to the second degree? Do I hear a motion to come into time against? We're now entertaining the time against this amendment to the second degree. Are there any delegations wishing to speak against the amendment to the second degree? We're now coming into time. We're now coming to the voting procedure. Note passing is suspended. Admins, please keep voting position. Every delegation wishing to vote in favor of this amendment to the second degree, as well as the whole amendment, please raise your placards high now. Okay, please may lower down. With 100% of majority, this amendment has passed. Clapping is definitely in order. Wie so eine Meute, die sich drauf stürzt. Wow. Punishment? May the House please come to order? While Syria offered humanitarian aid for the little kids who wanted some Haribo, he won't get punished for it. Haben wir ein Amendment? Nein. Are there any amendments? Why, or is any delegation preparing an amendment? Order, please. Order, please. Is any delegation preparing an amendment right now? Here. We have from Iran. We have something.
Punkt 1. Ach, schon wieder? Okay. Iran, is this current? Okay. Okay. Then we don't have to entertain it. Yeah. Then we're waiting for further amendments.
Oder sollen wir jetzt ein paar Sachen vorlesen? Weil wir in 7 Minuten.
Gossip?
Weil wir in 7 Minuten Pause. Wir können jetzt eine Strafe machen.
Jetzt schon?
Ja, weil wir haben doch in 7 Minuten Pause.
Ja, können wir machen.
Okay. Because of our time delay, we will have our break in 7 minutes. That's the reason why we're starting with the first punishment now. Because otherwise we don't have any amendments
Russland,
to
Frankreich,
entertain.
Somalia und Syrien. Russland. Achso.
Sollen die alle zusammen direkt machen?
Wir können die alle zusammen singen lassen, oder?
Okay. Was sollen die denn singen? Okay. Are there any song wishes for the first punishment concerning Russia, France, Somalia and Syria? Frozen.
Punishment for not using
For going to the toilet too often. Are there any song wishes which these countries have to perform here right now?
we all have to sing together.
Yes.
You can sing along if you want.
Sing the national anthem of Iran.
Yeah.
That's a good punishment.
No.
Why not?
Are there no song wishes?
It was a suggestion, right?
Yeah.
Anthem of Iran.
And you can forget it.
This will not be provided.
Thank you. Sorry, Ross. Nothing personal.
Was können die denn sonst singen?
Wir fällt nur Atemlos oder Frozen?
Ja, gut.
Frozen.
Okay, then we will begin with the normal song Frozen for these 4 people. I think everyone already heard this.
Hey, war das extra viel ausgerechnet jetzt?
Zufall!
Das war Ben.
Zufall! Ich hab hier über die... Doch, ja. Ist glaube ich nicht laut. Yes, of course. For sure.
All the 4 delegations have to come to the front, and you're getting 2 microphones. Yeah, you can split them up.
United States, please turn out the light.
Can we do instead Ramstein, Dalai Lama? No. Please.
Who is the another
It's a German song. No, I hate this song. Yes,
Please,
no. That's why.
Please, both
Dalai
people
Lama
singing.
from Ramstein.
Syria. You.
We have to move a bit to the side so we can read the lyrics.
Oh, come on.
I can't hear the microphone, actually. But I guess that's fine.
Ich bewege meinen Mund mal, ja. Einmal Chris.
Okay, let's go.
Please face the audience.
No. Lyrics?
Snow glows white on the mountain tonight, not a footprint to be seen. A kingdom of isolation, and it looks like I'm the queen. The wind is howling like the swirling storm inside. Couldn't keep it in, heaven knows I've tried. Don't let them in, don't let you always have to be. Don't let them know. So now they know. Makes everything seem small.
And the fears that once controlled me
can't get to me at all. Now time to see what I can do with the limit and test and breakthrough. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. Let it go, let it go. Run on with the wind and sky. Let it go, let it go. You'll never see me cry. I stand, and here I'll stay. Let the storm rage on.
Thank you.
The power flurries through the air into the ground. My soul is spiraling, frozen fractals all around. My one that is like an icy blast. I'm never going back. The past is in the past.
Fuck you.
Let it go. Let it go. The perfect girl is gone. Here I stand in the light of day.
Thank you.
Let the storm rage on. You'll never bother me anyway.
Thank you very much.
Can Frank and Samaya sing again because we didn't hear them?
No, because we're going to lunch. We now have